Level 0. Before any bullet is fired, wars often start with words. That's level 0. It's the stage of threats, propaganda, and chest thumping. Imagine two neighbors arguing over who owns the fence between their yards. At this point, no one's thrown a punch, but both are yelling loud enough for the whole street to hear. In geopolitics, that looks like fiery speeches at the United Nations, leaders sending not-so-subtle tweets, or state media blasting dramatic headlines. Think back to the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union often exchanged heated rhetoric long before missiles were ever moved into position, or more recently when North Korea and the US went back and forth with colorful nicknames and threats. Technically still peace, but the tension felt like an action movie trailer. Level 0 might seem harmless, but it's deceptive. Words shape public opinion, justify future actions, and box leaders into corners. Once you've told the world your enemy is a serious threat, it's much harder to back down without looking weak. It's the diplomatic version of someone cracking their knuckles before a fight. Nothing's happened, but everyone watching knows something could. Level 1. If level 0 is all about words, level 1 is where those words suddenly start hitting wallets. Welcome to the world of sanctions, embargoes, and economic warfare. The kind of fighting where nobody fires a gun, but entire economies feel like they've been drop-kicked. Picture this: you're in a heated argument with your roommate. Instead of throwing hands, you cut off their Wi-Fi password and hide the snacks. Technically, you didn't hurt them, but let's be honest, it stings. On the global stage, that's what sanctions are. Instead of soldiers, you send banking restrictions. Instead of bombs, you block trade routes. And instead of invading cities, you starve economies of fuel, medicine, or vital technology. History is packed with examples. In the 1990s, the UN placed sanctions on Iraq, crippling its ability to trade internationally. More recently, Russia has faced sweeping sanctions after its invasion of Ukraine. Banks cut off from global systems, luxury goods banned, even billionaires losing access to their super yachts. It's not flashy like tanks rolling in, but it hurts. And here's the science behind it. Economists call this weaponized interdependence. Globalization means countries rely on shared systems, banks, shipping, even software. Shut someone out and suddenly their modern society starts to feel medieval. But here's the dark twist. Sanctions can backfire. Cut off resources too aggressively, and the targeted country might double down, lash out, or build black market workarounds. In fact, some argue that heavy sanctions can actually push nations closer to war, not further away. So while level 1 might look like the peaceful option, it's really the first serious squeeze. No explosions yet, but make no mistake, the fuse has been lit and it's burning slowly. Level 2. If level 1 is about freezing bank accounts, level 2 is about slipping into those accounts at 3 a.m. and stealing passwords. Welcome to the world of covert operations. Spying, sabotage, and cyber strikes that unfold where no one can officially point fingers. It's like a neighborhood where everything looks calm, but someone keeps sneaking out at night to loosen the bolts on streetlights or flatten tires. No one sees it happen, and everyone wakes up suspicious, wondering who to blame. The danger isn't in the act itself, it's in the mistrust it creates, because suspicion spreads faster than proof. On the global stage, this means intelligence agencies planting undercover agents, sabotaging supply lines, or hacking into power grids. During the Cold War, the CIA and KGB practically made this an art form, funding secret rebellions, tapping phones, even sneaking into embassies to swap documents. Fast forward to today, and the battlefield has shifted to cyberspace. In 2010, the Stuxnet virus, believed to be a US-Israeli operation, slipped into Iranian nuclear facilities and quietly destroyed centrifuges. No bombs, no missiles, just lines of code that caused real-world damage. What makes level 2 so dangerous is its deniability. If your power goes out after a cyber attack, was it a glitch or a foreign rival sending a message? Leaders can't always prove who pulled the trigger, so tensions rise without clear evidence. Scientists studying conflict call this the gray zone, where actions fall between peace and war. And that grayness is exactly what makes it risky. A country under attack might retaliate too strongly, or accuse the wrong enemy, dragging everyone up the escalation ladder. So while covert ops may feel sneaky and clever, they're also gasoline near a flame. At level 2, the war hasn't gone public, but the shadows are already on fire. Level 3. At level 3, the war finally shows its teeth, but not always directly. Instead of sending their own armies, nations begin fighting through proxies. This means funding rebel groups, arming militias, or quietly backing entire governments to do the dirty work for them. Why? Because it's cheaper, safer, and provides something every leader loves: plausible deniability. You get to weaken your enemy without your own soldiers coming home in body bags. History is full of examples. During the Cold War, the US and Soviet Union avoided direct clashes but fueled conflicts across the globe: Vietnam, Afghanistan, Angola. American money and weapons flowed one way, Soviet support flowed the other, and local fighters paid the highest price. Even today, proxy wars dominate headlines. In Yemen, Syria, and parts of Africa, regional powers funnel money, drones, and advisors while denying they're officially involved. Scientifically, political analysts call this a form of asymmetric escalation, where a superpower pushes the fight outward, using smaller players as buffers. It creates distance from the battlefield, but multiplies the chaos on the ground. Civilians often find themselves trapped in conflicts that aren't even truly theirs. And here's the danger: proxy wars rarely stay small. when outside nations pump in. Endless weapons and cash, wars drag on for years, becoming bloodier and harder to end. What starts as a localized dispute can spiral into a grinding stalemate where no side wins, but everyone suffers. Level 3 is where things start to feel serious. The humor is gone, the costs are real, and the stakes are higher. At this stage, you're not just watching a conflict, you're watching the world's larger powers use smaller nations as chess pieces in a deadly game. Level 4. By level 4, the war is no longer hidden in shadows or fought through middlemen. This is the stage of limited conventional clashes, border skirmishes, sudden raids, and military encounters that test just how far each side is willing to go. It often starts small. A patrol crosses the wrong line, shots are fired, and suddenly, two nations are staring each other down. In 1969, China and the Soviet Union clashed along the Ussuri River in a series of bloody border battles. More recently, Indian and Chinese soldiers have repeatedly faced off in the Himalayas, sometimes with sticks and fists instead of rifles, but with deadly results all the same. Military strategists call this controlled escalation. The idea is to send a signal. We're willing to fight, but not all-out war yet. These clashes are usually short and sharp, but they're also unpredictable. A single miscalculation by a local commander can turn a warning shot into a full-scale battle. What makes level 4 dangerous is its volatility. Unlike sanctions or covert ops, soldiers are now face-to-face. The fog of war, confusion, adrenaline, human error, creates situations leaders thousands of miles away can't always control. A skirmish, meant to last hours, can escalate into days or spiral into a regional crisis. At this stage, civilians begin to feel the tension more directly. Towns near contested borders empty out, roads are blocked, and entire regions brace for the worst. The fire is lit, but not yet raging. Level 4 is the tipping point. It's no longer whispers, secret moves, or proxy battles. This is when nations openly draw blood, knowing that the next step could drag both sides into the abyss of full-scale war. At level 5, the gloves are off. What began as border skirmishes has now erupted into full-scale conventional warfare armies mobilized, tanks rolling, jets screaming overhead, and artillery pounding cities into rubble. This is war in its most recognizable form, the kind you see in history books and documentaries. Think of World War II after 1939. No longer contained to political threats or small raids, it became armies of millions clashing across continents. Or more recently, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, a massive conventional push involving missiles, tanks, and ground troops aiming to overwhelm an entire nation. Military science describes this stage as the kinetic phase, where the raw energy of war is unleashed. Battles aren't limited to frontiers anymore. They spread to cities, supply lines, and key infrastructure. Civilians become targets, whether directly or indirectly, as bombs fall near homes and resources are seized for the war machine. The brutality of level 5 lies in its scale. Logistics become as important as bullets. Armies need food, fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. Wars at this stage devour. Resources like fire devours oxygen. And once a nation commits, backing down becomes almost impossible. Retreat means humiliation. Defeat could mean collapse. Psychologically, this level transforms societies. Patriotism, fear, and propaganda surge. Families are torn apart. Economies shift overnight to fuel the war effort. Ordinary life disappears under the shadow of constant fighting. Level 5 is the turning point where nations either double down for survival or seek desperate exits. But history shows once conventional war begins, it rarely stays contained. The pressure to win often drives leaders to escalate further, setting the stage for even darker chapters ahead. Level 6. By level 6, the war isn't just fought on the battlefield. It's fought against the very infrastructure that keeps a nation alive. Armies shift from targeting soldiers to targeting the systems that feed them, move them, and keep society functioning. Roads, bridges, fuel depots, communication hubs, power plants, these become the new front lines. History offers chilling reminders. During World War II, Allied bombers relentlessly targeted German railways and factories, crippling their ability to supply the front. The Gulf War of 1991, U.S. airstrikes destroyed Iraq's power grid, plunging cities into darkness. And more recently, missile strikes in Ukraine have focused on energy infrastructure, leaving millions without heat or electricity in the dead of winter. Military theorists call this strategy systemic paralysis. The idea that if you choke off the arteries of a nation, the body of its army collapses. It's a cold calculation. Starve the enemy's logistics, and their ability to fight evaporates. But in practice, civilians suffer first. When power grids fail, hospitals go dark. When supply lines crumble, food shortages begin. War is no longer just a soldier's burden. It becomes everyone's nightmare. This level is dangerous because it blurs the line between combatants and innocents. Bombing a bridge may cut off enemy tanks, but it also cuts off families trying to escape. Destroying fuel depots may weaken the army, but it also freezes entire cities. Level 6 is when war becomes total, not just about defeating an enemy on the battlefield, but about breaking their entire way of life. And once leaders embrace this kind of destruction, the temptation grows to push even further, reaching for weapons and tactics once thought unthinkable. Level 7. By level 7, the rules of war begin to break. The battlefield is no longer just tanks and the trenches, it's everywhere. This stage introduces unconventional and asymmetric tactics, where the weaker side finds creative, often terrifying ways to level the playing field. Drones buzzing overhead, striking targets with surgical precision or crashing into power plants. Guerrilla fighters blending into city streets, hitting hard and disappearing before an army can react. Cyber attacks crippling hospitals, stock, markets, or even water treatment plants. This is war fought not only with bullets, but with fear and unpredictability. History shows how devastating this can be. In Vietnam, guerrilla tactics bled a superpower dry, proving that unconventional strategies can outlast sheer firepower. In Iraq and Afghanistan, improvised explosive devices, IEDs, turned roads into death traps, making even routine patrols a gamble. And today, drones have transformed modern conflicts, from the mountains of Nagorno-Karabakh to the skies. Over Ukraine, where cheap consumer tech is repurposed into deadly weapons. Strategists call this asymmetric warfare, when one side exploits vulnerabilities. Instead of confronting strength head-on, it's David versus Goliath, but in the modern version. David has access to hacking tools and explosive drones. The danger of level 7 lies in its unpredictability. Unlike conventional battles with clear front lines, unconventional warfare seeps into daily life. Markets, schools, and neighborhoods can suddenly become battlegrounds. Civilians can't tell where safety ends and danger begins. This is the level where war feels omnipresent. It no longer respects boundaries or rules. And once nations normalize these tactics, this path to even more destructive weapons, once thought untouchable, begins to open. Level 8. At level 8, war enters its most chilling phase, the moment when weapons of mass destruction move from distant threats to real options on the table. Nuclear warheads, chemical agents, biological weapons, tools so devastating they don't just kill soldiers, they endanger entire civilizations. This is the level of nuclear posturing and brinkmanship. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the world held its breath as US and Soviet leaders stared each other down, each side ready to launch if the other flinched. Diplomacy pulled humanity back from the edge, but the lesson was clear. Once these weapons are in play, even a single misstep could trigger catastrophe. Sometimes the threat alone is the weapon. Nations conduct missile tests, parade nuclear-capable vehicles, or make fiery speeches to remind their rivals, "We could end this all right now." It's psychological warfare at the highest level, designed to paralyze opponents with fear. More recently, North Korea's nuclear program has pushed the world into familiar tension. Each test launch sparks global headlines because every demonstration carries the same message. We're willing to climb higher on the ladder if you force us. Scientists call this deterrence theory. The idea that by showing off your deadliest weapons, you actually prevent their use. But deterrence is a fragile balance. One accident, one misread radar signal, one overconfident leader, and the unthinkable could become real. Level 8 is the point where war stops being about territory or power and becomes about survival itself. It's no longer how do we win, but how do we make sure the world doesn't end? And the terrifying truth is, from here, the next step leaves almost no room to turn back. Level 9. If level 8 is about threats and warnings, level 9 is the nightmare, the actual use of weapons of mass destruction. At this stage, restraint is gone. Nuclear warheads detonate. Biological or chemical agents spread. The goal is no longer victory on the battlefield. It's annihilation of the enemy's capacity to exist. History gives us only one glimpse of this horror. In August 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were struck by atomic bombs. In seconds, entire cities vanished, and tens of thousands of lives were extinguished. Survivors described skies turned to fire, shadows burned into walls, and a silence so deep it felt like the world had ended. That was just 2 bombs. Today, thousands of nuclear weapons sit armed and ready, each one far more powerful than those first detonations. Scientists have modeled what a full nuclear exchange would look like. Beyond the initial blasts, firestorms would send soot into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight. Crops would fail, temperatures would plummet. This scenario is known as nuclear winter, a chain reaction where the war doesn't just kill millions instantly, it starves billions over time. And it's not only nukes. Chemical weapons can choke entire cities. Engineered pathogens could sweep across continents. These are weapons that make war borderless, where civilians and soldiers share the same fate. At level 9, humanity stares into the abyss. This isn't about seizing land or forcing peace talks. It's about raw destruction, calculated to break an enemy so completely that surrender is the only option. But the price is catastrophic. Once unleashed, these weapons can't be controlled. Level 9 is the point where war becomes self-destructive, a firestorm that threatens not just armies, but the survival of humanity itself. Level 10. Level 10 isn't just about war. It's about what happens when war erases the very foundations of society. At this point, the conflict has spiraled so far out of control that survival itself becomes the only goal. Nations no longer fight for victory, but to drag their enemies down with them. It's mutual destruction, the absolute abyss of human conflict. Imagine nuclear exchanges so devastating that cities vanish in minutes, entire continents scarred beyond repair. Governments crumble under the chaos, supply chains disappear, and the systems we take for granted, electricity, medicine, food, distribution, cease to exist. In this world, there are no victors, only survivors, scrambling through the wreckage. History has never truly reached this level, but we've seen glimpses of how fragile Society can be. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, survivors faced radiation sickness, famine, and societal collapse. During the Black Death in medieval Europe, not a war, but a catastrophe, the collapse of order showed us how quickly civilization can fracture when systems break.
Level 10 is all of that, magnified by deliberate human action.
Scientists warn that in a global nuclear war, fallout wouldn't just poison the air. It could plunge the planet into years of nuclear winter, wiping out crops and ecosystems. Civilization itself could unravel. The world as we know it wouldn't simply change, it would vanish. At level 10, war is no longer a contest of nations. It's a suicide pact written in fire and ash. An ash where the idea of winning is meaningless. Humanity teeters on the edge, staring into a future where there may be no future at all. This is the final rung of the ladder. The moment where escalation doesn't just end wars, it ends everything.